It's strange, isn't it, how early we start learning to shape ourselves around what others want. You don't even realize it's happening at first. Someone frowns when you speak too loud, and you learn to whisper. Someone laughs when you cry, and you learn to swallow your tears. Someone praises you for being so polite, and you learn that silence is safer than truth. You keep collecting all these lessons until one day you've become a collage of approvals, a person built out of other people's comfort zones. I used to think that was just being a good person. I thought kindness meant self-erasure, that love was something you earned by being less of yourself. I can still remember the quiet panic in my chest whenever someone looked disappointed. That tiny drop in someone's tone was enough to make me twist myself into a new version just to be liked again. It's exhausting living like that. You spend years fine-tuning every word, every gesture, hoping it'll make someone stay. And yet, no matter how careful you are, someone always leaves. Someone always misunderstands you. You realize there's no formula, no perfect combination of politeness and performance that guarantees love. You could give everything, every piece of your honesty, every drop of your energy, and still, someone would say it's not enough. That's when it begins to sink in. Maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's the belief that love and safety come from being perfect. I remember looking at my own reflection once and not recognizing the person staring back. I had learned to smile on cue, to sound confident even when I was terrified, to carry other people's comfort like it was my responsibility. And under that, there was this hollow ache, the kind that doesn't scream but hums quietly beneath everything, reminding you that you've gone missing somewhere along the way. It's easy to lose yourself when you're always trying to be chosen. Every yes that should have been a no, every silence you kept because you didn't want to upset anyone, they build up. And they don't just disappear. They stay inside you as tiny betrayals, fragments of truth you left behind. You start to believe that being accepted matters more than being whole. That's the saddest lie of all, because no matter how many times you adjust yourself, someone will still find a reason to disapprove. There will always be people who need you smaller to feel bigger, quieter to hear their own echo. You can spend your whole life shrinking, and they still won't be satisfied. The world will always have opinions. They'll say you're too emotional or too distant, too ambitious or too lazy, too kind or too naive. It's a game you can't win because the rules keep changing. But here's the thing no one tells you when you're young. You were never supposed to play that game. You were supposed to live, not perform. You were supposed to speak, not filter. You were supposed to love without calculating whether you'd be loved back in the same way. Somewhere along the way, we traded freedom for acceptance, and it cost us our peace. I think the real tragedy is how early that conditioning starts. The moment someone says, "Be good," or "Don't embarrass me," you start to associate love with obedience. It's not their fault entirely. They were taught the same thing. Generations of people passing down fear disguised as manners. Behave. Fit in. Don't make a scene. It's a quiet epidemic of self-abandonment. And you carry that into adulthood, thinking that if you just stay agreeable enough, if you just keep everyone comfortable, maybe you'll finally be safe. But safety built on pretending isn't safety. It's suffocation with polite manners. You smile through discomfort, nod through resentment, and tell yourself it's maturity. But deep down, you know it's fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being called selfish, fear of being seen as too much. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd been told the truth instead. That love is not earned by disappearing, that you don't have to prove your worth through exhaustion. Maybe then we wouldn't grow into adults who mistake people-pleasing for empathy. Maybe we wouldn't equate exhaustion with kindness. Maybe we'd know that saying no isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You know what's ironic? The more you try to please everyone, the more distant you become from the ones who could love you for real. Because how can anyone truly love you if they've never met the real you? They fall in love with a version, polished, edited, cautious, but not with your truth. And then one day, when you're too tired to keep the act going, the illusion shatters, and both of you are left wondering what happened. There's a quiet kind of grief that comes with realizing how much of your life was spent seeking permission to exist. It's not a dramatic heartbreak. It's softer, lonelier. It hits you in the small moments, when you hesitate before speaking, when you apologize for something that didn't need an apology, when you agree just to avoid tension. Those are the moments when your soul whispers, "This isn't me." And maybe that's where it begins. The slow, trembling awareness that you can't keep living like this, that something sacred inside you is tired of being polite, that your silence isn't peace, it's paralysis. You start to sense it in your chest, this quiet urge to stop performing, to stop pretending that being loved by everyone is worth being lost to yourself. It's terrifying at first, the idea of letting go of approval. Because if you stop caring about what people think, what's left? Who are you when you're not defined by their reactions? It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, with no guarantee of what's below. But the alternative, staying in the cage, that's its own kind of slow death. So maybe that's the first act of real courage, to stop trying so hard to be liked, to sit with the discomfort of disapproval and still choose yourself, to look at the people you love and think, even if they don't understand me right now, I won't abandon myself again, because that's where freedom starts. In the decision to exist without justification. Maybe it's not about becoming fearless. Maybe it's about being scared and still telling the truth anyway. Maybe it's about realizing that love, real love, doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be present. And maybe, just maybe, the world starts to make sense again when you stop trying to make everyone else comfortable at the cost of your own soul. You know, there's this moment that sneaks up on you, quiet but undeniable, when the mask starts to crack. It doesn't happen in some grand cinematic way. It's usually something small. Someone's offhand comment, a night where you just can't fake another smile, a silence that suddenly feels unbearable. That's when you feel it. The weight of every version of yourself you've built just to survive. For me, it came during an ordinary conversation. Someone said something trivial, but I heard it like an echo of every time I'd been told I wasn't enough. And instead of brushing it off like I always did, I felt this heat rise inside me. Not anger, exhaustion. Pure, bone-deep exhaustion from always pretending I didn't care when really I cared too much. That's when it hit me. I'd built my entire life on a lie. The lie that if I did everything right, if I stayed polite, agreeable, reliable, I'd be loved. But love born from performance isn't love. It's a transaction. It's you trading authenticity for approval, and the currency is your soul. And the worst part? You start believing that's normal. You learn to endure disrespect because you don't want to be difficult. You laugh off things that hurt because you don't want to seem sensitive. You say, "It's fine," so often that the words become your armor, a shield that hides how you're slowly disappearing. You convince yourself that being agreeable is strength, but really, it's a quiet surrender. And then one day, something breaks. You realize that no matter how carefully you walk, someone will still find fault. You can be the kindest, calmest person in the room, and someone will still call you cold. You can be honest, and they'll call you rude. You can stay silent, and they'll call you weak. It's an unwinnable game. You keep adjusting yourself, thinking maybe this time you'll get it right. But the rules shift. The standards twist, and you're left exhausted and hollow again. It's in that emptiness where truth finally speaks, that voice inside you, the one you've ignored for years. It doesn't yell. It just asks one question. What if you stopped? What if you stopped explaining, stopped apologizing, stopped editing yourself to fit the comfort of others? The thought terrifies you at first. You imagine being rejected, abandoned, misunderstood. But beneath that fear, there's something else. Relief. The kind of relief that comes from realizing you don't have to keep performing. You start to notice how much of your anxiety was built on this illusion of control. You thought if you could just say the right thing, behave the right way, look the right part, you could avoid pain. But control is just fear disguised as order. It's you trying to manage the chaos of other people's perceptions, forgetting that their reactions were never yours to manage in the first place. I used to think control made me safe. I thought it protected me from judgment, from rejection, from chaos. But in reality, it only made me smaller. It made me anxious. I was always anticipating what someone might think, preparing for criticism that hadn't even happened yet. And in that constant state of preemptive defense, I stopped living. I was surviving my own imagination of disapproval. The truth is, no matter how perfectly you curate yourself, you'll still be misunderstood. People don't see you as you are. They see you through their own pain, their own projections. You could be offering love, and they'll call it weakness. You could be setting boundaries, and they'll call it selfishness. And if you keep chasing their approval, you'll end up chasing ghosts. The moment you realize this, really realize it, something starts to shift. You stop begging for fairness from a world that never promised it. You stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop over-explaining yourself to those who already decided who you are. That's the beginning of peace. Not when everything around you calms down, but when you stop needing it to. I wish I could tell you it's easy. It's not. The first time you disappoint someone on purpose, it feels like betrayal. The first time you say no without cushioning it with excuses, you feel guilty for hours. You'll question yourself, overthink it, replay the conversation in your head. But if you stay with that discomfort, something incredible happens. You survive it. And once you realize you can survive it, you stop fearing it so much. You begin to see that your worth isn't something others can give or take away. It's intrinsic. It's not a negotiation. It's the quiet knowledge that you belong here, not because you fit, but because you exist. And when that truth begins to sink in, the fear starts to fade. That's when you begin to taste real freedom, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone's applause, the kind that feels like breathing after holding your breath for years. You start saying what you mean, walking away when you need to, and showing up without armor. You stop trying to be flawless and start choosing to be real. And maybe for the first time in your life, you realize you don't have to earn peace. You just have to stop trading it for acceptance. There's a moment that always comes after the collapse, that quiet, trembling space between who you were and who you're becoming. It's confusing. You think that letting go of control will bring relief, but what it really brings at first is fear. The kind of fear that lives in your stomach, whispering that without the rules, without the constant effort to please, you'll fall apart. You don't realize right away that it's the opposite, that what's falling apart is the illusion. When you start saying no, people notice. Some pull away, others push harder. It's strange. You spend years trying to be agreeable, and when you finally stand your ground, suddenly you're different. They'll tell you you've changed, and they'll say it like it's something bad. But deep down you'll know. This isn't change. It's uncovering. The person emerging was always there, waiting beneath all the pretending. The hardest part isn't losing people. It's losing your old self. The one who kept everyone happy, who avoided conflict like it was poison. You miss that version sometimes, even though you know she was built on fear. There's grief in that, a kind of mourning for the safety she once promised. Because even if it was a cage, it was familiar. And familiarity has a strange way of feeling like love, even when it hurts. But every time you hold your boundary, something inside you strengthens. Every time you speak honestly, even when your voice shakes, you reclaim a piece of yourself. It's messy at first. You'll say too much sometimes. Other times you'll go silent because your words are still learning how to sound like truth instead of apology. You'll stumble. You'll question if it's worth it. But this is what real healing looks like. Not graceful, but real. You start to see the ways guilt has been living rent-free in your mind. That voice that says, "You're selfish for putting yourself first," isn't yours. It was taught to you by people who benefited from your compliance. Maybe parents who mistook obedience for respect. Maybe teachers who rewarded silence more than curiosity. Maybe lovers who called your boundaries cold. It's not your voice. And when you finally realize that, you can start to let it go. Because guilt isn't always a sign that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's just a sign that you're breaking a pattern. And patterns, especially the ones built from survival, don't die quietly. They'll whisper, scream, bargain. They'll tell you you're losing everything, and maybe you are. But what you're losing isn't peace. It's the performance that kept you from ever knowing it. There's a strange kind of freedom in realizing you don't need to explain yourself anymore. You can love people deeply and still not live by their expectations. You can care about them without carrying them. You can walk away without turning it into war. That's not cruelty, it's clarity. And the clearer you become, the less you owe to misunderstanding. I think this is where real courage begins. Not in defiance, but in softness. The kind of softness that says, "I can love you and still choose me." That's not ego, that's maturity. It's what happens when you finally stop equating your worth with someone else's comfort. You realize that shrinking yourself doesn't make anyone safer. It only keeps both of you asleep. And maybe for the first time, you begin to trust yourself. Not because life suddenly makes sense, but because you've stopped outsourcing your truth. You start asking, what do I think? What do I need? What do I feel? Simple questions, but when you've spent your life adjusting to everyone else's needs, they feel revolutionary. You start noticing how much energy you used to waste trying to predict reactions, walking on eggshells, rehearsing responses, sculpting your words like they were fragile glass. You were trying to protect everyone from disappointment, but all it did was rob you of your own presence. The truth is, you can't control how people perceive you. You never could. And that realization, though terrifying, becomes the doorway to peace. I remember the first time I said, "I don't need you to understand me." It wasn't said with anger. It was quiet, almost gentle, but it felt like breaking a spell. I realized I'd been living under this invisible rule that understanding equals love. But love doesn't always come with understanding. Sometimes it's just the willingness to let each other be. That's what freedom starts to feel like. Not detachment, but space. Space to breathe without explaining. Space to exist without approval. Space to make mistakes and not crumble under the weight of them. It's in that space where you start feeling your own rhythm again. Slow, steady, alive. You stop chasing peace as if it's a prize someone else can hand you. You start noticing it in small moments, in the pause between thoughts, in the quiet after honesty, in the deep exhale that follows a decision made from truth instead of fear. That's what healing really is. Not becoming untouchable, but becoming real enough that even your pain feels like part of your wholeness. And somewhere along the way, you stop needing to be seen as good. You just want to be true. And that, my friend, is when life quietly begins to change. There's a strange relief that comes with realizing you don't have to keep fixing yourself. For so long, I believed that if I could just find the right version of me, the calm one, the confident one, the endlessly understanding one, then life would finally make sense. I thought peace was a reward for perfect behavior. But the truth is, the more I tried to fix myself, the further I drifted from who I really was. I wasn't healing, I was editing. You start to see how the world benefits from that illusion. Every message, every advertisement, every quiet comparison whispers that you are almost enough, but not quite. It's brilliant in a cruel way. Keep people insecure and they'll keep consuming. Keep them doubting and they'll keep obeying. You grow up thinking that self-worth is something you buy, prove, or perform, but all it really does is keep you distracted from your own truth. It's unsettling when you finally notice it. How much of your identity has been borrowed? Your desires shaped by trends, your opinions sculpted by noise, your values inherited instead of chosen. You begin to realize you were never truly free. You were simply comfortable inside a system that profits from your self-doubt. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The first instinct is anger. You feel cheated, manipulated. You want to burn everything down, every lie, every fake ideal. But underneath that fire, there's sadness, a quiet grief for the years you spent chasing approval that was never meant to fill you. You start to understand that your exhaustion wasn't weakness. It was your soul rebelling. It was trying to tell you, this isn't who we are. That's when the rebellion begins. Not loud, but steady. The rebellion of saying no to the voices that tell you you're incomplete. The rebellion of no longer needing to glow under someone else's light. You stop chasing better and start exploring real. You stop treating self-love like a checklist and start treating it like a homecoming. It's not glamorous, it's raw, unfiltered, sometimes painfully slow, but it's honest. You start peeling away everything that isn't truly yours. The goals that were never your goals. The people you kept just because you feared being alone. The habits that numbed more than healed. It's terrifying, like taking off armor you've worn your whole life. But under all that weight, there's something wild and soft waiting for you. The self that existed before conditioning. Curious, messy, alive. And here's the thing no one tells you. The system doesn't want you to find that self. Because once you do, you stop being controllable. You stop buying what you don't need. You stop living on autopilot. You stop believing that productivity equals worth. You start asking dangerous questions like, who am I when I'm not performing? And what if I'm already enough? Those questions don't make you easy to market to, but they make you free. You begin to notice how uncomfortable freedom feels at first. You're not used to the silence it brings. Without all the noise, the striving, comparing, apologizing, your mind feels too quiet, your hands almost empty. But slowly, that silence becomes sacred. You start hearing things you'd forgotten, your intuition, your genuine desires, the rhythm of your own heart. There's a sweetness in this stage, the tenderness of rediscovery. You find beauty in ordinary moments again, the way sunlight hits your skin, the sound of your own laughter when it's unfiltered, the peace of not rushing anywhere. You start to realize that joy was never missing. You were just too distracted to notice it. And you begin to understand love differently too. It's no longer something you earn by bending yourself into shapes that fit someone else's comfort. It's something that flows naturally when you stop pretending. Love starts to feel less like a performance and more like a presence. Something that doesn't demand, doesn't shrink you, doesn't make you trade truth for belonging. You see, this whole time you thought freedom was about doing whatever you want, but it's not. It's about remembering who you are when the wanting quiets down. It's about realizing that the world will keep telling you you're broken and learning to smile softly, knowing you're not. And maybe that's where healing starts to deepen, not in trying to be your best self, but in finally being your whole self. The flawed, uncertain, curious, still learning self. The one that doesn't need fixing. the one that was waiting all along, patiently, beneath the noise. When you meet that version, the unfiltered you, there's no grand revelation, just a quiet recognition. Like coming home after being gone too long. You look in the mirror and for the first time, you don't see a project, you see a person, and that changes everything. At some point, the noise begins to fade. The world doesn't go silent exactly. It's just that the things that used to drown you no longer hold the same power. The voices of judgment, the constant comparisons, the weight of everyone's expectations. They're still there, but distant now, like a radio playing in another room. You start to see it all for what it really is, projection. Everyone speaking through the filter of their own pain, their own insecurities, their own unmet needs. And for the first time, you stop taking it personally. You realize that most of the criticism you ever received wasn't about you at all. It was about them, their discomfort, their fear, their limits. You were just the mirror. That's a hard truth to swallow because it means you've spent years twisting yourself to soothe reflections that were never yours to fix. But once it sinks in, a quiet peace follows. You stop arguing with people who can't hear you. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to edit your truth into something digestible. There's this deep exhale, like your soul has been holding its breath for years and finally remembers how to breathe. You begin to understand that acceptance was never supposed to come from outside. You were chasing it in the wrong direction the whole time. The approval you were searching for from others was just the echo of the acceptance you'd been withholding from yourself. Every time you tried to prove your worth, what you were really trying to do was convince yourself that you were enough. It's strange how compassion begins to grow out of that realization, not just for yourself, but for everyone else too. You start seeing how universal this pain is. Everyone's carrying their own invisible wounds, trying to look okay while secretly craving to be seen. And that changes something in you. You stop resenting people for not giving you what they couldn't even give themselves. You start forgiving, not because it's noble, but because it's freeing. Forgiveness stops being a moral duty and becomes an act of self-liberation. You realize you can't hold on to anger and freedom at the same time. They live in different rooms. And when you let go of resentment, something miraculous happens. Space. Space where the weight used to be. Space for joy to stretch out again. And that's when you start building a different kind of relationship with yourself. You stop being your own critic and start being your own witness. Instead of constantly analyzing your flaws, you just observe. You notice when you're triggered without hating yourself for it. You notice your patterns without drowning in shame. You start replacing the harsh inner voice with gentleness, the same gentleness you've always offered everyone else. It's not that the old fears vanish overnight. They still visit sometimes. The anxiety about being misunderstood, the instinct to please, the urge to over-explain. But now you recognize them for what they are. Echoes, not commands. You can watch them pass through you like clouds without letting them dictate your sky. And the beautiful irony. The less you chase approval, the more respect you naturally attract. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because people can feel when someone is grounded in their truth. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't flinch in the face of misunderstanding. Not because they don't care, but because they know their worth isn't up for debate. You start noticing how calm feels more powerful than control. You stop needing to prove your point. You stop needing to fix the image others have of you. You realize that sometimes peace looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it's just choosing not to react. There's this quiet strength that grows inside you, steady, unshakable. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that simply is. You begin to trust that life doesn't need your constant micromanagement to unfold the way it's meant to. You learn to let moments breathe. You begin to allow uncertainty to exist without panicking. And that's when you realize something profound. Letting go was never about indifference. It was about love, the kind of love that no longer tries to control, persuade, or earn. Love that allows. Love that stays soft even when things don't go as planned. Love that says, I am enough and so are you, even in the mess. That's what freedom really feels like. Not fireworks, not euphoria, just a deep, steady calm that fills the space where fear used to live. And once you taste that calm, you know there's no going back. You start to notice how strange it feels when things finally quiet down inside you. At first, it almost feels wrong, like peace is suspicious, like you're forgetting something important. You've lived so long in survival mode that calm feels unnatural, even dangerous. Your mind tries to find something to fix, some problem to chase, some approval to win. It doesn't know what to do with stillness, but then you begin to realize that this stillness isn't emptiness. It's clarity. It's what's left when all the noise finally burns out. You start to see your own life without the distortions of fear and comparison. And what you find there surprises you. Simplicity. You don't need as much as you thought you did. You don't need everyone to like you. You don't need to have it all figured out. And you don't need to perform worthiness anymore. That's when the world begins to soften. You stop forcing things to happen. You stop chasing closure from people who were never capable of giving it. You stop analyzing every conversation, every silence, every shift in someone's tone. Instead, you just breathe. And for the first time, that breath doesn't feel borrowed. It feels yours. You start realizing that control was never safety. It was a disguise for fear. All those years you spent trying to manage everything, what people think, how they feel, how things unfold. It wasn't love or responsibility. It was terror. Terror of chaos, of rejection, of pain. But the irony is, control created the very anxiety it tried to protect you from, because life isn't meant to be contained. It's meant to move, to surprise, to expand. When you finally let go, something magical happens. You stop fighting life and it starts working with you. You start to see how things fall into place once you stop clutching at them. How the right people stay without begging and the wrong ones drift away without drama. How opportunities arrive not because you chase them, but because you're aligned with them. It's almost laughable how simple it is once you stop forcing it. It's not that you stop caring entirely. It's that you start caring differently. You care with boundaries now. You care without losing yourself. You show up from fullness instead of from lack. You start realizing that your peace is too expensive to trade for someone else's approval. And the moment you stop negotiating your worth, the world starts treating you differently. But even then, the ego will whisper, what if you lose it? What if it all falls apart again? And sometimes it does. You'll slip back into old habits, say yes when you mean no, overthink, over-apologize, overcompensate. But you'll notice it faster now. You'll catch yourself mid-pattern and smile, not with shame, but with tenderness. You'll know you're learning, not failing. That's the quiet evolution, the one no one applauds because it happens internally. The day you stop spiraling after someone's opinion, the moment you choose rest instead of reaction, the instant you notice your fear and choose to stay open anyway. Those are the invisible milestones that mark your freedom, and with time, something inside you settles into trust. Not blind optimism, not toxic positivity, real trust. The kind that says, I can handle what comes. You stop bargaining with life and start collaborating with it. You learn to flow instead of resist. You start to believe that things fall apart only so they can make room for what truly fits. That's when gratitude quietly sneaks back in, not the performative kind, where you force yourself to list blessings to stay positive, but the real kind. The kind that shows up naturally when you realize how little you need to feel whole. You start to notice beauty in ordinary things, the warmth of sunlight on your hands, the sound of someone's honest laughter, the relief of an unfiltered conversation. You don't need fireworks anymore. You crave depth. You crave sincerity. You crave peace, not the peace that comes from things going your way, but the kind that stays even when they don't. And the more you live like this, the lighter you become. Not because life stops being hard, but because you stop adding unnecessary weight to it. You stop dragging old guilt, stop rehearsing old pain, stop trying to predict every outcome. You begin to trust that you can meet whatever comes with presence instead of panic. One day, you catch yourself laughing, really laughing, without worrying how it looks or sounds. You realize it's been a long time since you felt that free, and in that moment, you understand something profound. Peace was never something to earn or achieve. It was what remained when you stopped trying to be someone else. There comes a point when you realize that the most radical act of self-love is no longer chasing anything, not people, not perfection, not peace. Just being here, breathing, existing in your own truth without the need to prove or justify it. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but it changes everything. You start to see how much of your suffering came from the constant effort to earn what was already yours. Love, belonging, worth. You were running towards something that was never outside of you, and now, standing still, you feel it. That quiet hum of enoughness beneath all the noise. It doesn't shout, doesn't demand attention, it just is. You begin to see that you don't need to become someone new to feel whole. You just need to stop abandoning the person you already are. That realization lands gently, like a truth you've known all along, but were too scared to believe. You start seeing beauty in your imperfections, wisdom in your wounds, resilience in your softness. Every scar starts to look like proof that you survived, not evidence that you're broken. There's this subtle shift in how you relate to others too. You stop trying to impress and start connecting. Conversations feel lighter because you're no longer calculating your words. You're no longer performing sincerity. You're living it, and the right people feel that. The ones who used to be drawn only to your masks start to fade, and the ones who see your soul begin to appear quietly, naturally. It's not always comfortable. Authenticity has a way of rearranging your life. Some people leave, some doors close, some parts of you resist the change because the old patterns still whisper promises of safety. But the more you choose truth over comfort, the more alive you feel. Even heartbreak feels different now, cleaner somehow. It doesn't destroy you anymore, it deepens you. You begin to understand that love, the real kind, doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't come with conditions disguised as care. It doesn't need you to be small to feel secure. Real love meets you where you are, not at your most polished, but at your most honest. And when you start loving yourself that way, it becomes easier to recognize when others can't. You stop begging for breadcrumbs from those who never intended to feed you. You stop mistaking attention for affection or control for care. And that's when peace becomes not something you find, but something you embody. You stop reacting to every opinion, every shift in someone else's mood. You start seeing that not everything requires a response. Not every misunderstanding deserves your energy. Silence stops being emptiness. It becomes a form of self-respect. You also start forgiving yourself for all the years you didn't know better. For the times you stayed too long, tried too hard, loved too blindly. You stop calling those things mistakes and start seeing them as part of your becoming. because the truth is you had to lose yourself to realize you were never really lost, just hidden beneath layers of fear and conditioning. And that forgiveness, that acceptance, changes the way you carry yourself. You walk slower now, more grounded. You speak softer, not because you're afraid, but because you no longer need to shout to be heard. You've learned that presence is louder than performance. You've learned that real confidence isn't about proving you're right. It's about knowing you're enough even when you're wrong. You start waking up differently. The mornings don't feel like a battlefield anymore. You don't wake up already apologizing for existing. You just breathe. Sometimes you still feel fear or doubt, but now they don't define your day. They visit, you acknowledge them, and you move on. That's what liberation feels like. Not the absence of fear, but the absence of control it once had over you. And in those moments of quiet, when you're just sitting with yourself, no distractions, no roles to play, you feel something sacred, peace that doesn't need a reason. A kind of peace that simply exists because you've stopped fighting yourself. That's when you finally understand what all of it was for, the pain, the unraveling, the confusion. It was never punishment. It was purification. It was life stripping away everything false so that what's real could finally breathe. You smile not because everything is perfect, but because for the first time you don't need it to be. It happens quietly, almost without notice. One day you wake up and realize that life feels lighter, not because everything suddenly makes sense, but because you've stopped asking it to. You no longer need to control the story. It's enough to live it. There's a softness that replaces the constant tension in your chest. You start moving through the world differently, not as someone who's trying to earn a place, but as someone who knows they belong. You don't chase peace anymore. You live from it. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head before they happen. You stop measuring your worth by how many people understand you. You stop taking every silence as rejection. You start seeing that most things are not personal. They're just life unfolding, each person tangled in their own battles, their own illusions, their own healing. You begin to recognize that freedom was never about having no responsibilities or no pain. It was about having no pretenses. It was about walking through your days without pretending to be anyone else. That's the kind of freedom that feels like home, quiet, deep, rooted, and you start noticing how the world responds to you now. People sense the shift. They can feel the steadiness in your energy, the calm in your presence. You no longer need to prove anything, and that, paradoxically, makes your truth louder. You don't have to demand respect. It naturally finds you. Because when you respect yourself, your time, your energy, your boundaries, life starts mirroring it back. Of course, there are still storms. There are still days when old fears creep in, when doubt knocks at the door. But now you meet them differently. You don't run or panic. You just say, I see you. You let the emotions rise, and you let them go. You've learned that peace doesn't mean the absence of pain. It means the absence of resistance to it. You start embracing impermanence too. The constant change that once terrified you now feels like rhythm. You see endings not as failures, but as natural parts of the cycle. You stop clinging to people or moments, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand. What's meant for you won't need to be forced. You can love deeply and still let go gracefully. That realization alone feels like a lifetime of exhaling. Even your dreams change. They stop being about proving your worth or escaping your past. They start being about creation, about expressing what's true, sharing what's real, giving what's yours to give. You stop trying to be special and start wanting to be sincere. That shift brings a peace you didn't know you were missing. You notice how the small things mean more now. The quiet morning light, the smell of rain, a slow walk, laughter that isn't staged. You realize that life isn't something to conquer, it's something to experience. You used to chase meaning like it was hidden somewhere far away. Now you see that it's in the simple act of being present, in each breath, each connection, each honest moment, and the people who once triggered your insecurities. You start seeing them differently. You understand now that everyone is doing their best with the tools they have, even when their best hurts you. You set boundaries not out of bitterness, but out of love. Love for yourself. And oddly enough, love for them too. Because compassion without boundaries is chaos, and you've lived through enough of that. There's a moment when you look at your reflection, not to critique, not to analyze, just to meet your own eyes. And you realize that the person staring back isn't a stranger anymore. You see yourself, not the masks, not the wounds, not the expectations, just you, whole, flawed, real, alive. And it hits you that this is what you've been searching for all along. Not perfection, not approval, not even happiness, just the quiet safety of being yourself in a world that taught you to be everything else. You smile at your reflection, and there's no performance in it, just gratitude for all the heartbreak that cracked you open, for all the mistakes that humbled you, for every goodbye that forced you to return home to yourself. Because now you understand. You never really lost anything essential. You were just peeling away everything that wasn't you. And when you finally stop needing to be more, you start becoming whole. That's when life begins to unfold effortlessly, like it's been waiting for you to stop fighting it. You step outside, feel the wind on your face, and realize that nothing around you has changed. And yet, somehow, everything has.